Welcome to another episode of Metaverse Studio, brought to you by Phygtl, an AR Web3 platform that lets brands create immersive experiences for their users, unlocking a new dimension. And without further ado, here comes our host, Tommaso Di Bartolo.
And bonjour, buongiorno, good morning, at least here from Silicon Valley. Actually, good afternoon or good evening, depending on when you're tuning in from. Welcome to another session of the Metaverse Studio, where I love and I'm humbled to be here with peers in the realm of the Web3 and the Metaverse. What is it we do here? We deconstruct value creation in the Metaverse, right? And today we have a great lineup, and two friends and peers that are contributing in the space for a very long time. I would like to introduce, by kicking off here, things by Marcia Caporn. As a Chief Revenue Officer at Credenza, she works to bring Web3 solution to professionals and collegiate sporting properties and educate partners on new property rights. Implication of Web3. Credenza enables brands to seamlessly integrate Web3 technology into traditional operations. Marcia, what a pleasure to have you.
Thanks so much. I'm honored to be here.
And we have, the pleasure is all mine. We have Radhika Iyengar. Radhika Iyengar is a Web3 expert, TEDx speaker, Silicon Valley woman of influence, and Silicon Valley serial entrepreneur. She's founding partner at StarChain Ventures, a Silicon Valley-based venture studio focused on solving significant global challenges with Web3 and a blockchain. Radhika, such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure to be here.
Phenomenal. So the topic is about value creation. Metaverse, Web3 value creation. I am impressed, Radhika, you published your first book in 2019. So you're very, very early on, right? With the right signs of how much value this new, not technology, but behavioral change that we are experiencing, that we are immersed in, right? Talking of behavioral change, which I undertake a lot at UC Berkeley, right? Marcia, you have been a former sports athlete, right? Why don't we start out with really, what is the fandom, right? How is the fandom experience changing? And maybe then we can bounce a bit back and forth, Radhika, not just replace fandom with consumer, right? What is the consumer experience, right, that we are going to have with Web3 tools and decentralized application going to change compared with Web2? Marcia, you want to start from a fandom perspective?
Yeah, well, in sport, there's a lot of different vendors that get outsource the relationships or the tools the teams need. So you have ticketing, you have merch, and they're all different silos which don't communicate well. And where blockchain, anywhere there's data and communication problems, blockchain's a great solution. And so the most exciting part for us is to basically allow the fan to have more of one identity across all these vendors, these platforms, to empower the teams to regain that relationship more real time and to look more at the transactions and their actual engagement with the brand and then reward that. And to really enable them to, surprise and delight their fan in ways that is meaningful to them based off of what they're doing and what they care about.
So when you say a reward, do you mind, for us in our mind that are deep into this topic, right, we kind of connect what we mean, right? But how would you explain the Web3 rewarding of a fan to somebody who has never been in a metaverse or any decentralized application based on a blockchain?
Yeah, I think, we try to move away from Web3 terminology and are now really focusing on the value proposition to the athlete. And so an example would be, how do we give a blockchain QR code or NFC tag to a season ticket holder and encourage them to take a free parking pass and, scan it, and then we can take that off the ledger. But then at the same time, dynamically upsell them more passes is a great example of, we're encouraging season ticket holders to have a new experience and then see if they'd like to upgrade and engage in this new, more premium tier within the organization.
So it's really connecting a digital assets that unlocks further commercial benefits for the fan, right?
Yeah, or even, are they at a game? Can you have them check in at a game and, dynamically upgrade them because of their loyalty? Or can you give them a perk in stadium? It's really unlimited, as long as the fans connected and across all the domains, you kind of unlock any of your inventory of assets to, turn them on rather than reacting after the fact with data.
That's really intriguing, very intriguing. Radhika, what are your experiences in terms of consumer benefits that a Web3 app can provide that we couldn't experience in Web2? What have you experienced? What can we share with our audience?
Well, I think the fundamental difference, and you brought it up earlier, is there's an ethos behind Web3, and that is about ownership, identity. These are fundamental, not just concepts, they are foundational to everything in Web3. And so, although the consumer eventually will not really think about the mechanics of how that happens from a technical perspective, the value that a consumer has is really pretty powerful because, as Marcia pointed out, first of all, there's multiple metaverses. So as you move from one metaverse into another metaverse, you as a consumer are going to be able to carry with you assets. So assets you purchase in one metaverse are now usable in another metaverse. That is something that is just not possible today with Web 2, because if you're using a platform, whatever you do in that platform, let's say a game, for example, it's going to remain in that game. You're not going to be able to take that asset into a different game or a different environment. And so this ownership perspective and the identity perspective is really foundational. And so in an open and decentralized metaverse, that ownership and identity becomes a core power, if you will, because now you're going to be able to move across different environments, across different metaverses. You're going to be able to monetize things, sell assets in another environment, for example. So this transportability is going to be something that we in real life have, for example, but don't necessarily experience that in the digital sense yet. And so this is very transformative. The other aspect, let's just switch aside, is not just on the consumer side, but on the creator side. So the creators are also going to be able to monetize in the metaverse in a very, very transformative way. And the benefits that they can experience as creators, whether you're large or small, are pretty incredible, because right now it's usually the larger creators the branded creators that might have power, if you will. But I think leveling the playing field, whether you're a small or a large creator, is really very transformative as well. And that's something that we're going to be seeing more and more of.
A lot to unpack. So from a fan perspective, right, Marcia is saying, okay, we can provide an extended level of experience for the fan in the stadium or even outside the stadium to get access to membership, universal ticketing or special ticketing, right? You mentioned parking, right? So this connection between the physical world and this digital world, right? Without even using the word blockchain, right? But when we say digital, for us, it's kind of implied, right? Because it's traceable, right? Because it's transparent, it's because it's unmutable, right? And then on Radhika starts putting at the center of all this, and you mentioned it too, Marcia, identity. Right. And I think this concept of identity needs to be re-educated, or actually to be educated, maybe what it means in context of a Web3 realm, right? Because identity right now is, okay, I do single sign-on a centralized platform such as the social media, but it's what we do there is that we contribute towards a third-party tool, right? Whatever we do, they own. right? I think that, a humankind is not aware of that, right? And the way that I like it actually to explain is that for the very first time is ours with Web3. Because in Web2, we contribute with our time towards others to create things, to give others, right? Text, images, videos, knowledge, right? Enrich the others, right? But now we decide where we put our time and the identity, the identity or this content that we create, the contacts, the content that we share, the interactions that we do. We have them in a backpack, right? You mentioned something, Radhika, I want to provoke here this episode. You mentioned something that in my book, you said there are multiple metaverses, which I agree. In my book, I describe the metaverse with a capital M. And then I describe metaverses with a lower m, right? Or I actually like to expand metaverse decentralized application. And you also replace this with the word environment. So a digital environment in which you meet other people, right? And I absolutely follow the nuances of what you are mentioning. The question here is, and maybe we want to double click on that, because we are saying multiple metaverse dApps. When does a metaverse start and when does a metaverse end? What are the ingredients that make a metaverse? Radhika, do you want to go first with that?
Sure. I mean, the simplest way to think about it, and it's really quite powerful, is it's a 3D virtual online world. That's what I mean by when I talk about an environment. So we have many environments. In real life, we can go to a shopping mall. That's an environment. We can go to a concert. That's an environment. We can go to a museum or a library. That's an environment. We can go downtown to a city. That's an environment. So we are in multiple, and we're at home. That's an environment. So those are very different environments. And so a metaverse is really a 3D virtual environment, a world that you can enter into. I wanted to slightly backtrack to what we were talking about when we were talking about engagement with the consumer. I think this is also a very transformative point where a brand, for example, is going to have a personal connection to a consumer for the first time. It's not about saying, oh, I've got so many likes and so many emojis that are generated based on something. It's about a relationship with that consumer via their digital wallet that is always accessible. And as you think about a consumer moving from one environment, one metaverse, into another metaverse, the brand doesn't necessarily lose that connection. And that is pretty transformative. And it definitely doesn't exist in Web2 digital online worlds.
Yeah, I'll take that a step farther, because I was actually asked this about athletes. Like, do you actually want to own your relationship? And I mean, I was like, of course. The exciting thing is the athlete's not a slave to a platform anymore. They can actually produce content and have a relationship with a fan that's authentic to their real passions. And they can produce content in a cadence that actually fosters their real job on the court, rather than basically in a cadence that makes them so they don't get filtered or shadow banned and doesn't meet the needs of an outsourced platform. So 100% they should start to own these relationships, because that's when they can actually have a meaningful relationship that's sustainable, rather than that something that's depressing them, distracting them, they're outsourcing, and they don't own. And like you said, it's going to bring them into new 3D shopping environments, social shopping environments. I've seen some great use cases of athletes talking about the brands in 3D shops. I mean, it's so much more authentic, so much more direct, but they just have to have the courage to say, I'm going to bring you over here, come with me.
This podcast is powered by Phygtl, with a special guest from Women of the Future. To Metaverse.
The word owning the relationship, right, also might be translated eventually with having direct access to, right, rather than just being having a third party in between, right? So now I'm an end user, and I am in one of those digital environments that we like right nowadays to call metaverses, right? And Radhika said there are 3D online worlds, right? And in this environment, there are brands, regardless of what industry, right? I mean, the most recent one that I published, I think this week, yesterday, about Disney, right? Now moving in direction Web3, right? The immersive worlds, more rewarding worlds, right? So when we say owning the relationship, right, and when we think of immersiveness, right, maybe we want to here start connecting this one word also that Radhika mentioned, creation and co-creation, right? Because on on the Roblox of this world, or with the Minecraft of this world, we learned that this younger generation, actually, that's how it started out, right, had the ability to co-create, to add the value. Like co-creation means really adding a layer of individuality, right, to those digital worlds, right? Have you seen anything, Marcia, maybe in the sports world or beyond sports world, right? What is your understanding nowadays of co-creation into this 3D worlds that we are referring to? If it makes
Yeah,
sense, one of us.
I've seen some really cool use cases of digital lockers and allowing the fans to decorate their own space and buying the different things that make the locker theirs, and kind of a fandom. And so that's one really powerful way that I've seen, as well as you know athletes creating virtual locker rooms where it's a space that's then featuring merchandise they've created. So it's ever growing, but it really, the great thing is it's always authentic to what the athlete cares about or the team thinks that the fan cares about, and how they think that decorating some space in this metaverse world will make them feel like more loyalty to the club, but then also like they're inserting their own will into the experience as well.
Radhika, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think creation is such a great word. It comes down to the power of the creator. I mean, people talk about creator economy. What does that really mean? For me, the creator economy is something that any creator, whether you're creating, co-creating, it's yours. You own it. You can monetize it. You have full rights to it. In the Web2 world, because the platform owns everything, the creators are kind of at the mercy of a third-party platform, which is basically dictating how much they get out of it, and it's usually pennies to a dollar compared to what they could be getting. And so it's a very lopsided conversation of monetization here. So when I think about creator economy and the liberation that we are going to be essentially seeing, because the creator, him or herself, can actually own this, monetize this, and get resale value, indeed, in any environment, is really something that's very powerful to think about. Because right now, if you create it on one platform, how do you know? I mean, will a brand be able to follow that into another metaverse? And if that item is resold, will they have a connection to the consumer that's now going to be having the ownership of that thing? That concept just doesn't exist. That ownership is not pervasive. And so this ownership and creator rights is really two sides of that coin. Can the creator then monetize in other worlds? And the answer is yes. So if a consumer is carrying a digital asset and taking from one metaverse into another metaverse because they own that and can monetize it in different environments, so too can the creator. The creator can see resales, for example, of a particular item. So Nike might say, well, I'm selling you this shoe in one metaverse. And now you're going to take that same shoe and go into another metaverse with it. But then you say, I want to buy something else. I want to sell this Nike, whatever. You're going to be able to do that. And so Nike is going to say, oh, wow, I've got a new owner. There's no way that you can do that currently with the structures that we have today. So I think this power of creation is really going to go beyond everything that we have conceived of in terms of being able to own something, being able to monetize it in another environment, and indeed see the life cycle of that which you created.
This is so. Yeah, go ahead, Marcia, please. Yes.
I was just gonna say you're so spot on, but so many of the bigger industries like sport have to unlearn these bad ways. I still see large institutions trying to come in, buy up all the rights, and they're still cutting out, the athletes, they're cutting out the teams and trying to manage the whole relationship themselves. And I'm like, that's not the point. And I feel like it's they can't get out of their own way. They know monopoly systems, and that's their favorite system. So it'll be.
I'd like to jump in and add to that, Marcia. You hit the nail on the head there, because we started off this conversation with a mindset. I think Web 2 has a certain model and a certain mindset, and everybody's been entrenched in that. And I'm going to be pretty scathing, and I'm going to say that Web 2 is a zero-sum game. So, if I have to succeed, you definitely have to lose. So it's all about that unfair advantage. Web 3 is a very, very different concept. And so when you think about a new model and a new way of doing things and a new interaction and a new monetization capability, people have to sort of unlearn the other way and relearn something that is brand new. And that happened in the early days of the internet. I mean, if you looked at e-commerce, when e-commerce came about, brick and mortar mentality had to morph into e-commerce mentality. That was a unique experience, not only for a person who owned a shop, for example, but also the buyer. Do I trust this platform? Can I put my card, my debit card, credit card, my information onto this platform and buy it? Will that thing really be delivered to me? And there were new business models that were born. SaaS suddenly came about. So I think that from a business transformation perspective, we're at a transition point in technology, and a transformative one at that. And so I think both consumers and creators and brands are going to be able to develop new models of interaction and monetization that now are available to all of those stakeholders, not just one. And so this unlearning and relearning, I think you really hit that on the nail, Marcia.
My younger son, Samuel, 16 years old, he has been playing in the theater since he was 9. And when there is a moment of high importance, I've learned that they call it the theatrical pause. They create space, on stage to allow the audience to digest what they just heard or saw. And I think this should be right now one of those theatrical pause, because if you focus on the word unlearn, which is trivial, unlearn means you take what you're doing as a process right now, okay, your marketing team, your strategy team, right, your sales team, right, your product team, and you really need to pause. Like, it's not working the way that we have done it in Web 2. I mean, Radhika, you said, you placed another bomb, right? You said, okay, these are new monetization models, right? In my book, I describe how advertisement, the definition of advertisement is whomever has the deeper pockets is paying to reach mass market, is no longer to work like that. And you see this on the prognosis and the forecast of Google, that is no longer going to grow with a double digit. And you see this also already in the most recent revenues that Facebook has, for the very first time since inception, right, since birth, right, had a downturn on what they're monetizing. And the reason for that is the consumer engagement on Web 2 has reached its limits, meaning e-commerce has reached somehow a limit. Facebook or Instagram, right, besides TikTok, right, all the major social media platforms have reached the limit. So the question is, what are those new? Go ahead, Radhika. I see you're moving the lips.
I'm chomping at the bit, because well, this is the thing that we talk about in our book. I mean, in my book, it's very much the same concept. We talk, even though it's called Enterprise Blockchain has arrived, you have to understand that it was written in 2019, and enterprise was really the driver, if you will, of this technology. And it still is to many an extent, because if you look at now the power of the brand and how they're rethinking and embracing a new way of doing business, indeed, it's brands that are leading the way here. But pause for a minute there too, and look at the difference between Web 2 and Web 3. I mean, let's not forget Web 2 is based on the internet. The internet is TCP/IP protocol, which is a communications protocol. That means packets of information are sent and received. Period. End of story. Web 3 is a completely new construct where you're talking about identity, ownership rights, data can be owned truly. And Tommaso, you refer to this as, in a Web 2 platform, we're just contributing content. We don't own that content. We don't own any of that data that comes from that. And so it's a very lopsided, we talk about in our book, information and power asymmetries. And so in Web3, because now we have ownership of the content that we're creating, the data that we're producing, if you will, and are able to monetize that in a brand new way, there's a greater power and information symmetry that comes across the stakeholders. So there is something for everyone here, and that's very powerful, ethos altogether. So back to that learning and unlearning that we were talking about. The unlearning comes from really separating ourselves out from the old monetization models, capitalization models, and really looking at a new way of interaction. That means a new way of engagement that happens between consumer and brand and business. And all of us have something to gain here. That's the big difference, is all of us gain. So that's a very, very different mindset from saying I gain, you lose.
Yeah, yep. Spot on. I mean, spot on. But it'll be interesting to see what industry adopts it first or takes and what first step they take.
Yep.
I think we're already seeing that, right? I mean, you talk about sports. That's, again, a very great example of a new way of engagement between fan and athlete and sports brand, right? And also other brands that are contributing to that. So you'll have a Nike or an Adidas or any other sports brand that's also going to be involved in this stakeholder engagement. That's a great example. You're seeing that with luxury brands and fashion. I mean, that's an amazing area. And I think this is, again, that blend of art, technology, all of that blending in a brand new way. And again, that's also very powerful. We're sitting here at a real transition point, not unlike when we sat in the early internet days, looking at what that internet really meant. And we've had a few decades of a run for this. But this very same opportunity is redefined because, I think this engagement is really going to redefine what it means, but we're seeing many other areas come about as well. Early days for healthcare, for example. People often quip about the doctor will see you now in the metaverse. Well, that's not really that far-fetched. It's very much a new engagement model, again, between somebody receiving care and somebody providing care. So I think this giving and receiving interplay is going to be very much redefined. And whether you're talking about fashion or sports or healthcare, there's a new model in town.
It's this week I used one word. It's Ubuntu, right? It's together. It's collaborative. It's jointly, right? So it's really, we are building this thing of where we all together belong, and whomever is not understanding it because has still processes or mindset, because processes are actually the consequence of a mindset of an action, right? Who still has those Web2 related processes in place or mindset in place, right, will definitely be not in pole position for this new era, right, for this new opportunity. I'm loving the conversation with Marcia Caporn and Radhika Iyengar, this new episode here, this next episode, Metaverse Studio, but everything has a start and an end. We are coming, unfortunately, to an end, but before I let you go, dear ladies, Marcia and Radhika, I have one question, more a visionary question. Please take me, let's call it 5-10 years down the road. I know that in the metaverse, it's like a lot, right? But I'm really curious to pick your brain on, we definitely are in early adoption phase. The baby is still small. It's still being nurtured, is in the father's and mother's hand, called the metaverse, right? It will become an adult. It will run. It will contribute in an amazing way. What are bottlenecks or pitfalls that need to be unlocked nowadays in order to get to mass adoption? What do you think, Marcia?
I think ease of use and connecting domains so that value can travel dynamically is, the collaboration, like some consensus and buy-in that these wallets and dynamically transferring value is the new frontier, and allowing value from metaverses, from websites, from live events to kind of aggregate and travel with the fan, and become part of their digital identity, is really going to be, how easily can we make that for fans to do?
Phenomenal. Cross-value creation. I love this. Radhika, what are your thoughts? Take us 10 years down the road.
Along the same lines, when we're talking about the ease of being able to transport from one metaverse into another, from a technical capability, we're talking about interoperability. And that interoperability, when it comes to platforms, engines, for example, you have to have the ability to take that from one engine into another engine. And so that interoperability is something that we still are striving for. In many days, I think in many ways, it's kind of rewinding back a little bit in time. It's like that command DOS prompt days. We're very, very rudimentary in capability. I think the vision is extraordinary. And in the next 10 years and beyond, we're going to see those, what seemingly is very, very challenging, is going to become a reality, because again, we're going to be able to go from one world into another. The vision exists, but the mechanics of how that happens, and then to Marcia's point, how do you express that or render that in a seamless, friendly, approachable way so that the consumer has a seamless experience? That's, I think, going to be something that we all have to strive for and work towards.
I love it. So cross-industry value creation in order to achieve that interoperability. The best way to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much, Radhika. Thank you so much, Marcia. Humbled to learn one chat at a time. And for our audience, if you like what you heard, feel free to tune in. And as always, I'll meet you where? I'll meet you in the metaverse. See you next. Ciao.
Thank you so much for watching our podcast. Stay tuned on our social media network and see you in the metaverse.